The transport ship landed with a soft hum on the gleaming metal platform of Verdania Central Station. Kang Wu stepped out first, his diplomatic uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. Behind him followed Park Hana, carrying her research, equipment in a worn leather bag, and Li Tae, whose sharp eyes were already scanning their surroundings for potential threats. The air smelled clean but artificial, like filtered water with a hint of manufactured flowers. Above them stretched a dome of perfect blue sky, though Wu knew it was just advanced projection technology. Real sky existed somewhere above the dome, but no Verdanian had seen it in over 3 centuries. "Welcome to Verdania Prime," announced a tall, slender figure approaching them. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale green skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial sunlight. 4 arms moved gracefully as it gestured, and large, silver eyes blinked slowly. "I am Prime Cultivator Threnax, your assigned liaison." Wu bowed slightly, a gesture he had practiced many times during the journey. "Thank you for receiving us, Prime Cultivator. I am Ambassador Kang Wu, and these are my colleagues Park Hana and Li Tae." Threnax studied them with obvious curiosity. Humans were still relatively new to the Galactic Council, and most species found their appearance strange. Where Verdanians were tall and elegant, humans seemed compact and oddly proportioned. Where Verdanian skin was smooth and uniform, human skin showed wear and variation that spoke of exposure to uncontrolled environments. "Your request puzzles our council greatly," Threnax said as they walked through the station. The building stretched as far as the eye could see in every direction, its white walls gleaming with embedded lights that provided perfect illumination without shadows. "You wish to establish a research facility in Sector 7? "That is correct," Wu replied, noting how every surface around them was clean and manufactured. Even the plants and decorative arrangements looked artificial, their leaves too perfect and colors too bright. "But Sector 7 is wilderness," Threnax continued, his 4 arms gesturing in what Wu had learned was a sign of confusion among Verdanians. "It contains no infrastructure, no climate control, no protective barriers. It is simply empty land with growing things." Park Hana spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "That is exactly what we need for our research. We study how different species interact with natural environments." Threnax stopped walking and turned to face them fully. His large silver eyes blinked rapidly, another sign of confusion. "Natural environments are dangerous and unpredictable. Our ancestors abandoned such places for good reason. Why would any intelligent species choose to enter them willingly?" Li Tae remained silent, but Wu noticed his colleague's slight smile. As a former military scout, Li Tae had spent years in Earth's wilderness areas and found the Verdanian attitude both amusing and concerning. "We believe there is much to learn from natural environments," Wu explained carefully. "On Earth, we have found that spending time in wilderness areas provides benefits for both physical and mental health. It also teaches valuable skills for adapting to new situations." "Your species still ventures into uncontrolled areas regularly?" Threnax asked, his voice rising slightly in what sounded like alarm. "Many of us do, yes. We call it camping or hiking. Some humans spend weeks or even months living in natural environments using only basic tools and shelters." Threnax was quiet for a long moment, his 4 arms moving in complex patterns that Wu recognized as deep thought gestures. Finally, he spoke again. "Our behavioral scientists will find this fascinating to observe. Dr. Lethix has studied primitive behaviors in various species, but never had the opportunity to witness voluntary regression in real time." "Regression?" Park Hana asked, her eyebrows rising. "The abandonment of civilized living conditions in favor of primitive survival methods," Threnax explained matter-of-factly. "It occasionally occurs in damaged individuals who cannot adapt to proper urban environments. But you suggest healthy humans do this by choice?" Wu exchanged a glance with his teammates. This conversation was revealing more about Verdanian culture than months of briefing reports had managed to convey. The Verdanians were not just urbanized, they had completely lost touch with any concept of voluntary outdoor living. "We do not consider it regression," Wu said carefully. "We see it as a way to develop skills and understanding that complement our urban abilities." They continued walking through the station, past shops and restaurants and living spaces that all shared the same sterile perfection. Citizens moved in orderly patterns, their clothing matching their surroundings in subtle shades of white and silver. No one appeared to be in a hurry, and conversations happened in quiet, measured tones. "Your request creates significant challenges," Threnax continued. "Sector 7 has no transportation networks, no communication systems, no emergency services. If your research team encounters difficulties, we may be unable to provide assistance." "We understand the risks," Wu assured him. "We have extensive experience with wilderness operations." "You have survived in uncontrolled environments before?" Threnax asked, and now his voice carried what sounded like genuine concern. "Did you suffer permanent psychological damage from the experience?" Li Te finally spoke, his voice dry with amusement. "Some might argue we are permanently damaged, but not from camping." Threnax did not seem to understand the humor. "The Council has agreed to your request primarily because we are curious about human behavior patterns. However, we will be monitoring your activities closely. Dr. Luthix believes your experiment will provide valuable data about species adaptation limits." "We welcome observation," Wu replied diplomatically, though privately he wondered what the Verdanians would make of human camping techniques. They reached a viewing platform that looked out over the vast city. Buildings stretched to the horizon in perfect geometric patterns, connected by covered walkways and transport tubes. Everything was clean, ordered, and completely artificial. In the distance, Wu could just make out a dark line that marked the edge of Sector 7. "That is your destination," Threnax said, pointing toward the wilderness with one of his 4 arms. "We have not sent anyone there in over 2 centuries. Our sensors indicate it contains trees, water sources, and various biological entities, but no detailed surveys have been conducted." "It sounds perfect," Park Hana said, her excitement clear in her voice. Threnax stared at her as if she had announced her intention to jump off the platform. "Dr. Luthix is most eager to begin observations. He believes your species may demonstrate previously unknown adaptation mechanisms or possibly reveal the psychological breaking point when civilized beings are stripped of technological support." Wu nodded politely, though he suspected Dr. Luthix was going to be very surprised by what he observed. Humans had been camping for thousands of years, and Wu himself had learned wilderness skills from his grandfather, who had learned them from his grandfather before him. What the Verdanians saw as regression, humans saw as coming home. "When can we begin?" Wu asked. "Tomorrow, if you are prepared. A transport will take you to the edge of Sector 7. From there, you will proceed on foot." Threnax paused. "Are you certain you wish to continue with this experiment?" Wu looked out at the wild forest in the distance and felt a familiar excitement building in his chest. After months in the artificial environments of spaceships and urban planets, the thought of sleeping under real stars and breathing unfiltered air filled him with anticipation. "We are ready," he said. The transport vehicle hummed to a stop at the edge of Sector 7. Through the clear walls, Wu could see where the perfect city ended and wild nature began. The contrast was striking. On one side lay smooth pathways and gleaming buildings. On the other side stood tall trees with rough bark, tangled undergrowth, and shadows that moved with the wind. "This is as far as our transport network extends," announced the Verdanian driver, his voice tight with nervousness. "Are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed?" Wu shouldered his pack, feeling the familiar weight of camping gear his grandfather had taught him to use. "We are certain." Park Hana stepped out first, breathing deeply. "The air smells different here, more alive somehow." She pulled out her research tablet and began taking notes immediately. The oxygen content is slightly higher than in the city. The humidity level is natural rather than controlled. Li Tay emerged last, his practiced eyes scanning the tree line for movement. No immediate threats visible. Good sight lines along the forest edge. Plenty of cover once we move inland. He spoke quietly, but his words carried the confidence of someone who had spent years in similar environments. The transport driver watched them with obvious concern. Dr. Lethix wishes me to remind you that monitoring equipment has been placed throughout this sector. If you experience psychological breakdown or physical injury, emergency teams will be dispatched. Thank you for your concern, Wu replied politely. We will signal if we need assistance. The transport sealed itself and moved away quickly, leaving the three humans alone at the forest edge. For a moment, they stood in silence, adjusting to the sounds of wind in leaves and distant bird calls. After months of artificial environments, the natural sounds felt like music. Where do we begin? Park Hana asked, her excitement clear. Wu studied the landscape with experienced eyes. His grandfather had taught him to read terrain like others read books. We need fresh water first. Everything else depends on that. He pointed toward a slight depression in the land that curved into the forest. Water flows downhill. We follow that depression and listen for running water. They began walking into the wilderness, their feet making soft sounds on the natural ground. Behind them, the city's gleaming towers grew smaller. Around them, the forest grew thicker and wilder with each step. Dr. Lethix sat in his observation center, watching multiple screens that showed the humans from different angles. His forearms moved rapidly across control panels as he recorded every detail of their behavior. Fascinating, he murmured to his assistant. They show no signs of fear or hesitation. Either they have not yet realized their dangerous situation, or their species possesses unknown psychological adaptations. Perhaps they are simply in denial, suggested his assistant, a younger Verdanian named Quell. Many species experience temporary confidence before reality sets in. Continue recording everything, Dr. Lethix ordered. This may be the first documented case of voluntary primitive regression in an advanced species. Deep in the forest, Wu stopped suddenly and held up his hand. The others froze immediately. In the distance, they could hear the soft sound of running water. There, he said, pointing through the trees. A stream. They found the water source 20 minutes later, a clear stream that bubbled over smooth stones. Park Hana knelt and tested the water with a small device. Clean and safe to drink, she announced. The mineral content is excellent. Good. Wu set down his pack and began examining the area around the stream. Now we need the right location for base camp. He walked slowly along the stream bank, occasionally kneeling to examine the ground or looking up at the tree canopy. Li Tay understood what his colleague was doing and began his own survey of the area. High ground over there for good drainage. Natural windbreak from those large trees. Clear sight lines in 3 directions. What are they doing? Quell asked, watching the screens in confusion. They appear to be examining empty ground very carefully. Dr. Lethix leaned forward, studying the human behavior patterns. I believe they are attempting to select a location for shelter construction. But their methods are unlike anything in our historical records. They seem to be evaluating factors we have never considered important. Park Hana was photographing different plants and taking soil samples, while the 2 men continued their careful examination of potential campsites. The biodiversity here is incredible, she said. I count at least 15 different tree species within 50 meters. The soil composition varies significantly based on drainage patterns. Wu found what he was looking for 30 meters from the stream. A slight rise in the ground that would keep them dry during rain, surrounded by trees large enough to provide good anchor points, with clear views of the surrounding area, but enough cover to remain hidden from casual observation. "Here," he announced, dropping his pack on the spot. Li Tay nodded approvingly. "Good choice. Natural fortification possibilities. Multiple escape routes. Close enough to water but far enough to avoid flooding." "What are they discussing?" Dr. Lethix asked, though the monitoring equipment was recording their words. "They speak as if selecting ground for military purposes." "All humans appear to think, in military terms, when removed from civilization," Quell suggested. "Perhaps it is an automatic response to dangerous environments." Wu began unpacking his gear with methodical precision. He laid out items his grandfather had insisted every camper should carry: a small axe with a sharp blade, rope made from strong synthetic fibers, a tarp that could shed rain but breathe air, simple tools that could serve multiple purposes. "Now comes the interesting part," Wu said, hefting the axe. Park Hana continued her documentation work, but kept one eye on her colleagues as they began what appeared to be construction activities. "Are you building a shelter already?" "First we clear the ground properly," Wu explained, using the axe to remove small branches and level the earth. "Then we gather materials. A good camp starts with good foundation work." Li Tay was already moving through the surrounding forest, selecting fallen branches and testing them for strength. "Good hardwood here. These pieces will work for frame construction." He began dragging suitable wood back to the chosen site. Dr. Lethix watched in growing amazement as the humans began what could only be described as engineering work using primitive tools. "They are not randomly seeking shelter," he said slowly. "They are planning some kind of structure. But they have no construction equipment," Quell pointed out. "No power tools or manufactured materials. How can they build anything substantial?" "I do not know," Dr. Lethix admitted. "But their actions suggest they believe they can create effective shelter using only natural materials and basic tools." As afternoon sunlight filtered through the forest canopy, Wu worked steadily to prepare the campsite. He cleared away rocks and roots, creating a level platform large enough for their shelter. Every movement was purposeful and efficient, the result of skills learned over many camping trips with his grandfather. Park Hana documented native plants that might be useful for food or medicine, while Li Tay continued gathering construction materials. They worked as a team, each person contributing different expertise to their common goal of establishing a comfortable and safe base camp. "This is not what we expected to observe," Dr. Lethix said, reviewing hours of recorded footage. "They show no signs of psychological distress. Instead, they appear to be following some kind of systematic plan for wilderness occupation." "Should we be concerned?" Quell asked. Dr. Lethix considered the question carefully. "I believe we should be very interested indeed. These humans may possess capabilities we have never encountered before." As evening approached, the three humans had cleared their campsite and gathered materials for construction. They worked with quiet confidence, as if building shelter from natural materials was the most normal thing in the world. Tomorrow would bring the real test of their wilderness skills. But tonight, they would sleep under the stars for the first time in months, breathing clean air and listening to the sounds of a living forest. Dr. Lethix would be watching every moment. The morning sun filtered through the forest canopy as Wu examined the framework he had built the previous evening. What had started as simple branches stuck in the ground now looked like the beginning of something much more complex. He tested, each joint carefully adjusting angles and tightening connections with practiced skill. "The structural integrity is better than I expected," Park Hana said, running her hands along the wooden frame. She had studied engineering before switching to biology and could appreciate good construction work. "These joints will hold under significant weight." Li Tay returned from his morning patrol carrying an armload of different materials. "Found clay deposits near the stream bank. Also some flexible vines that will work better than rope for certain connections. He dropped his collection near the campsite and began sorting through it. Dr. Lethix stared at his monitoring screens in growing confusion. The humans had been in the wilderness for 3 days now, and their behavior made less sense with each passing hour. "They appear to be constructing something far more elaborate than simple shelter," he reported to Prime Cultivator Threenax during their daily briefing. "Explain what you mean," Threenax requested, his forearms folding in the gesture that indicated serious attention. "Initially, we assumed they would create basic protection from weather using available materials. However, their construction demonstrates advanced understanding of structural engineering principles. They are building something that could be permanent." Threenax viewed the recorded footage with growing amazement. "They work with such precision. Each piece they add serves multiple purposes. How do they know these techniques?" "That is what puzzles me most," Dr. Lethix replied. "They use no reference materials or construction guides. The knowledge appears to be instinctive." Back in the forest, Wu was demonstrating exactly that instinctive knowledge as he wove flexible branches between the main support posts. His grandfather had taught him that good shelter required 3 things: strong bones, weatherproof skin, and smart design. The bones were taking shape nicely. "Hand me that piece with the natural curve," he said to Li Te, who had developed an eye for selecting the right materials. "It will fit perfectly at the roof peak." Park Hana documented their progress with her camera, while also studying the Bo local ecosystem. "The forest is responding to our presence in interesting ways," she noted. "Birds are starting to nest closer to our camp. I think they recognize that we are not a threat." "Animals always know," Wu agreed, pausing in his work. "To watch a small creature with colorful fur, observe them from a nearby tree. If you move with respect for their home, they accept you as part of it." Li Te was working on what he called the defensive perimeter, though it looked more like landscaping to casual observation. He had created subtle barriers using fallen logs and stone arrangements that would funnel any approaching visitors along specific paths. "Security does not always mean walls and weapons," he explained to Park Hana. "Sometimes it means knowing who is coming and from which direction." Dr. Lethix found this particularly fascinating. "The security specialist appears to be modifying the natural environment for tactical advantage, but his changes are nearly invisible. An observer would need extensive training to recognize what he has accomplished." "Are they military engineers disguised as diplomats?" Threenax wondered. "I do not believe so. Their techniques appear to be civilian knowledge that includes military applications, as if their entire species learns these skills as a matter of course." By the 4th day, the human camp had evolved into something that defied easy categorization. The main shelter featured a slanted roof designed to collect rainwater and channel it into carved wooden containers. The walls were woven from branches and sealed with clay mixed with plant fibers, creating insulation that would maintain comfortable temperature in any weather. "The engineering is remarkable," Park Hana said, testing the water collection system as Wu poured a bucket over the roof. Clear water flowed along carved channels and dropped into their storage containers without a single leak. "You have created a functioning infrastructure using only natural materials. My grandfather always said that nature provides everything. You need if you know how to ask nicely," Wu replied, adjusting one of the channels slightly to improve water flow. Li Te had expanded his defensive improvements to include early warning systems. Carefully placed sticks and stones would make noise if disturbed by approaching animals or people. Hidden observation posts provided clear views of the surrounding forest. Most impressive was his camouflaged communication system, using polished metal to create signal mirrors that could send messages over long distances. "They have established what can only be called a fortified position," Dr. Lethix reported during his weekly summary. "However, their fortifications are so well integrated with the natural environment that they appear to be part of the forest itself." "Show me," Threenax requested. The recorded footage revealed something that amazed both Verdanians. From above, the human camp was nearly invisible. The shelter blended perfectly with surrounding trees. The defensive positions looked like natural rock formations. Even the cleared areas appeared to be natural forest clearings. "How is this possible?" Threnax asked. "Our ancestors required massive construction projects to create permanent settlements. These humans have accomplished something similar using only hand tools and natural materials. More concerning is their apparent comfort level," Dr. Lethix added. "They show no signs of stress or desire to return to civilization. Instead, they seem to be improving their position daily." Park Hana was indeed improving their situation, having discovered several edible plants and identified a grove of trees that produced nutritious nuts. "We could live here indefinitely if necessary," she told her companions during their evening meal around a carefully constructed fire pit. "The thought had occurred to me," Wu admitted, adding wood to the fire with precise movements that maximized heat while minimizing smoke. "This is better than most hotels I have stayed in." Li Te nodded agreement. "Certainly more secure. No one could approach this position without us knowing about it well in advance." He gestured toward his network of early warning devices, most of which were invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Dr. Lethix reviewed days of footage showing the humans eating meals they had prepared from forest plants, sleeping comfortably in their handmade shelter, and working together to continuously improve their camp. "They are not surviving in the wilderness," he concluded. "They are thriving in it. This changes everything we thought we knew about primitive living conditions," Threnax said slowly. "Perhaps we should reconsider what we mean by the word primitive." On their 7th night in the forest, Wu sat beside his fire looking up at the real stars for the first time since leaving Earth. The shelter behind him was warm and dry. Fresh water flowed from their collection system. Their food stores included both supplies from the city and items gathered from the forest. "Tomorrow, we should start on the workshop," he said to his companions. "Workshop?" Park Hana asked. "For making tools and repairs. If we are going to stay here long-term, we will need better equipment than what we carried in." Li Te smiled. "My grandfather would approve of this place. He always said the best fort is the one that does not look like a fort." Dr. Lethix made a note to request extended observation time. These humans were teaching him things about survival and construction that challenged everything he thought he knew about civilization. The warning came at dawn on their 10th day in the forest. Li Te felt the electromagnetic pulse before any of their equipment registered it. Years of military training had taught him to recognize the subtle signs that preceded solar storm activity. "We need to check our electronics immediately," he announced, waking his companions. Park Hana powered up her research tablet, but the screen remained black. "Complete system failure," she reported. "The backup units are dead too." Wu tried his communication device with the same result. "Solar storm," he concluded grimly. "A big one, from the look of things." 20 kilometers away in Verdania Prime, chaos was spreading through the perfect city. The electromagnetic pulse had destroyed delicate circuits throughout the urban infrastructure. Climate control systems failed, plunging some sectors into uncomfortable heat while others grew dangerously cold. Communication networks went silent. Transportation systems stopped working entirely. Prime cultivator Threnax stood in his darkened office, watching through the windows as emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the usually bright cityscape. "How long until systems can be restored?" he asked his chief engineer. "Unknown," came the frightened reply. "We have never experienced total infrastructure failure before. Our backup systems were not designed for this level of electromagnetic damage." "What about the humans in Sector 7? "All monitoring equipment is offline. We have no way to contact them or observe their condition." In their forest camp, the humans were having a very different conversation. "The fire is still good," Wu noted. checking their carefully maintained hearth. "We have plenty of firewood stockpiled. The water collection system does not need power to function." Park Hana inventoried their supplies with the efficiency of someone accustomed to working without technology. "We have enough food for 2 weeks if we supplement with forest resources. The preservation methods you taught us are working well." Li Tae was already adapting to the new situation. "I can modify the signal mirror system to send messages toward the city. Basic communication is still possible without electronics." "Should we attempt to contact them?" Wu asked, considering their options. "Let us see how serious the situation becomes first," Li Tae advised. "They might be too busy with their own problems to worry about us." He was correct. By the end of the first day without power, Verdania Prime was experiencing its first major crisis in 3 centuries. Citizens accustomed to perfect climate control struggled with natural temperature variations. Food distribution systems failed, leaving many areas without adequate supplies. Most disturbing of all, the water purification systems required constant electronic monitoring to function safely. Captain Iriloth of the Verdanian Emergency Response Corps found himself dealing with problems he had never imagined. "We have refugees fleeing the outer sectors," he reported to the Emergency Council. "They claim the air is becoming unbreathable without filtration systems." "How many citizens have requested emergency evacuation?" Threnax asked. "Nearly 10,000 so far, and the number grows each hour. But we have nowhere to take them. All our emergency facilities require the same infrastructure that has failed." Dr. Lethix raised one of his 4 arms, hesitantly. "There is one location with confirmed habitability," he said quietly. "Where?" "Sector 7. The humans were establishing a functional base camp there before we lost communication." The council members stared at him in disbelief. "You suggest we evacuate citizens to an uncontrolled wilderness area?" Threnax asked. "The humans demonstrated that such areas can support life without technological infrastructure. Perhaps they could teach us their methods." Captain Iriloth was desperate enough to consider any option. "Do we have any way to contact them?" "Long-range communication is impossible without our relay networks. However, if they are still alive, they might be able to see signal fires from the city." Meanwhile, in their forest camp, Wu was making the same observation. "Look at the horizon," he said, pointing toward the distant glow of the city. "That is not normal lighting." Li Tae studied the orange glow through a pair of simple binoculars. "Emergency fires," he diagnosed. "Lots of them. The city is in serious trouble." "Should we help?" Park Hana asked. Wu considered the question carefully. The Verdanians had treated their wilderness expedition as an amusing curiosity at best. But people in need were people in need, regardless of their previous attitudes. "Prepare the signal mirror system," he decided. "We will let them know we are here and able to assist." Li Tae positioned his carefully crafted mirrors to catch the morning sunlight and direct it toward the city. The signal was simple but clear. 3 flashes, pause. 3 flashes, pause, repeated continuously. The universal message for help available. Captain Iriloth was among the first to spot the distant flashes of light from Sector 7. "Confirmed signal from the wilderness area," he reported. "The humans are alive and attempting communication." "What is the message?" Threnax asked. "Assistance offered," the communications specialist translated after watching the pattern. "They are volunteering to help." Dr. Lethix felt a mixture of relief and amazement. "They survived 10 days without any technological support and are now offering to help us." The decision to seek human assistance was not easy for the Verdanian leadership. It meant admitting that their advanced civilization was helpless without its technology, while primitive wilderness living had proved more resilient. But as conditions in the city continued to worsen, they had little choice. "Send a delegation to Sector 7, Threnax ordered reluctantly. "Find out what help the humans can provide." The delegation that set out for the forest consisted of Captain Iriloth, Dr. Lethix, and Engineer Quexus. They traveled on foot, since none of their vehicles functioned without electronic systems. The journey that normally took minutes by transport required hours of difficult walking. They found the human camp in the afternoon, guided by smoke from the cooking fire. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about wilderness living. "Welcome to Camp Horizon," Wu said, using the name they had given their forest base. "I assume you are here about the power failure in the city." Captain Iriloth stared at the human camp in amazement. The shelter looked comfortable and weatherproof. Fresh water flowed from an ingenious collection system. The humans themselves appeared clean, well-fed, and completely relaxed. "How are you? Surviving without technology?" Dr. Lethix asked in wonder. "We are not surviving," Park Hana corrected gently. "We are living. There is a difference." Engineer Quexus examined their water system with professional interest. "This design could supply a small community," he noted. "How did you calculate the flow rates without computer modeling?" "Experience and observation," Wu replied. "My grandfather taught me to read water the way you read technical manuals." "Your grandfather was an engineer?" "He was a camper. But camping requires engineering skills, among other things." Captain Iriloth explained the situation in the city. Thousands of citizens needed temporary shelter while infrastructure was rebuilt. Food and water systems had failed. Most critically, many Verdanians were experiencing psychological stress from exposure to uncontrolled environmental conditions. "We can help," Wu said without hesitation. "But your people will need to learn new skills quickly." "What kind of skills?" Dr. Lethix asked. Li Tay gestured toward their thriving camp. "Camping skills. The ones you thought were primitive regression. How long would it take to teach these skills to our citizens?" Wu considered the question seriously. "The basics can be learned in a few days, enough to survive comfortably while your city is repaired, but true wilderness skills take years to master." "We have immediate need for the basics," Captain Iriloth said. "Can you help us establish temporary camps for our refugees?" "Of course," Park Hana replied. "That is what neighbors do in emergencies." Dr. Lethix realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in Verdanian history. For the first time in centuries, his species would need to learn survival skills from another people. The humans they had assumed were regressing to primitive conditions were about to become their teachers in advanced wilderness living. "We accept your assistance," Captain Iriloth said formally. "What do you need from us?" "Bring us your people," Wu replied. "We will show them how to be comfortable in any environment." The first group of Verdanian refugees arrived at Camp Horizon 2 days after the emergency delegation. 50 frightened citizens stumbled through the forest, led by Captain Iriloth and guided by Li Tay. They had never walked on uneven ground before, never breathed unfiltered air, never seen shadows that moved with the wind. "This is terrifying," whispered Engineer Quexus to Dr. Lethix as they watched their people huddled together in the forest clearing. "Look how they react to every sound, every movement in the trees." "They will adapt," Wu said confidently, overhearing the conversation. "All intelligent species have survival instincts. Yours have just been sleeping for a few centuries." Park Hana approached the group of refugees with calm authority. "My name is Park Hana, and I will be teaching you about forest resources. The first thing to understand is that wilderness is not empty space. It is full of useful materials and information." She knelt beside a cluster of broad-leafed plants near the stream. "These leaves can be woven into waterproof mats. The roots are edible when prepared correctly. The flowers indicate that fruit-bearing plants grow nearby." She demonstrated each point with clear, simple actions. A young Verdanian named Scholar Murthan watched with fascination as Park Hana created a small basket from plant fibers in less than 10 minutes. "You learned all this from books?" he asked. Some from books, but mostly from practice. Human children often learn these skills during family camping trips. We consider it normal education. Your children voluntarily enter dangerous environments? Dr. Lethix asked in amazement. We do not consider nature dangerous, Park Hana explained patiently. We consider it challenging and educational. Like any complex subject, it requires study and respect to master. Li Tae was working with Captain Ariloth and a group of Verdanian security personnel, teaching them to read the forest for signs of movement and change. See how these branches are broken? He pointed to subtle damage on a nearby tree. Something large passed through here recently. The breaks are fresh, probably within the last few hours. How can you determine the timing so precisely? Captain Ariloth asked, examining the broken branches closely. The cut surfaces are still moist. In this humidity, they would dry within a day. Also, no insects have found the exposed wood yet. Li Tae pointed to other clues that revealed information about forest traffic patterns. Within hours, the Verdanian security team was beginning to read basic signs in their environment. They could identify which trails were used by animals, which areas provided good visibility, and which locations offered natural shelter from weather. Your people learn quickly, Li Tae observed to Captain Ariloth during their evening meal around the expanded fire pit. We have never had reason to learn such skills before, the captain replied. But the crisis has shown us how helpless we became without our technology. Wu was conducting the most challenging lessons, teaching shelter construction to a group that included engineer Quexus and several Verdanian maintenance specialists. The key is to work with natural materials rather than against them, he explained, selecting a curved branch from their stockpile. This piece wants to bend in a specific direction. Fighting that tendency wastes energy and weakens the structure. Engineer Quexus struggled with the concept initially. Our construction methods rely on forcing materials into predetermined shapes using mechanical pressure and chemical bonding agents. That works when you have factories and machines, Wu agreed. But in wilderness conditions, you must understand what each piece of material can do naturally, then find ways to combine those natural properties into useful structures. He demonstrated by weaving together branches, vines, and clay to create a wall section that was both strong and flexible. This will bend in high winds rather than break. It breathes with temperature changes rather than cracking. And if damaged, it can be repaired using materials found within walking distance. The Verdanian engineer stared at the finished wall section with growing respect. The design principles are completely different from our methods, but the engineering logic is sound. Different environments require different solutions, Wu said. Your city methods work perfectly in cities. Forest methods work perfectly in forests. As days passed, more refugee groups arrived at the expanding wilderness camps. Li Tae had established 3 satellite locations, each capable of housing 30 people comfortably. Each camp featured the same basic elements: secure shelter, clean water, adequate food, and communication systems using signal mirrors and smoke signals. Dr. Lethix documented everything with notebooks rather than electronic devices, filling page after page with observations about human teaching methods and Verdanian learning patterns. They do not simply provide survival information, he noted. They teach underlying principles that allow students to solve new problems independently. Scholar Merthin had become one of the most enthusiastic students, mastering plant identification and food preparation techniques with remarkable speed. I never realized how much knowledge our ancestors possessed, he told Park Hana during a foraging expedition. We abandoned practical skills in favor of technological solutions. Both approaches have value, Park Hana replied diplomatically. The ideal situation combines technological capability with practical knowledge. That way, you remain capable regardless of circumstances. Is that how human society operates? With both technologies and traditional skills? Most humans learn at least basic wilderness skills during childhood. Some of us, like Wu and Li Tae, continue developing those skills throughout our lives. Others focus more on technology, but retain enough practical knowledge to handle emergencies. The most dramatic success story belonged to engineer Quexis, who had initially struggled with wilderness concepts, but gradually became fascinated by resource-efficient design principles. Under Wu's guidance, he designed and built a water purification system that used only gravity, sand, charcoal, and woven plant fibers to produce clean drinking water from the stream. This system could be scaled up to serve thousands of people, he explained excitedly to Dr. Lethix. No power requirements, minimal maintenance, completely sustainable operation. You have learned these techniques in only 2 weeks, Dr. Lethix observed. Human children master such skills during recreational activities? According to Wu, his grandfather taught him these same techniques when he was 8 years old. Humans consider it normal childhood education, like learning mathematics or language. Captain Iriloth was experiencing his own revelation as he worked, with Li Te to establish security protocols for the wilderness camps. Your defensive strategies use the environment itself as a weapon, he noted, studying camouflaged observation posts that provided complete surveillance coverage while remaining invisible to casual observation. Environment is always your most valuable ally or your most dangerous enemy, Li Te explained. The choice depends on how well you understand and respect natural systems. Our military training never included such concepts. We focused entirely on technological superiority. Technology amplifies capability, but understanding provides the foundation for all capability. A skilled person with simple tools can often accomplish more than an unskilled person with advanced equipment. By the end of their 3rd week in the wilderness, over 300 Verdanians were living comfortably in forest camps while their city slowly rebuilt its damaged infrastructure. Most remarkable was their psychological adaptation. Citizens who had initially been terrified by natural environments were now moving confidently through the forest, gathering food, maintaining shelters, and even enjoying recreational activities like swimming in the stream. We have documented a complete transformation in Verdanian wilderness adaptation capabilities, Dr. Lethix reported to Prime Cultivator Thrinax via signal mirror communication. Our people are not only surviving but thriving under conditions we previously considered impossible to endure. Are they eager to return to the city when repairs are completed? Thrinax asked through the same communication system. Dr. Lethix paused before answering. Many are asking if they can remain in the wilderness camps permanently. They claim to prefer this lifestyle to urban living. That is impossible. Wilderness living is primitive and dangerous. Respectfully, Prime Cultivator, our observations suggest that wilderness living as practiced by humans is neither primitive nor dangerous. It is simply a different form of civilization, one that integrates more closely with natural systems. Thrinax was quiet for a long time before responding. Continue your observations. This situation requires further study before we can determine appropriate policy responses. That evening, Wu sat with his original companions around their campfire, watching Verdanians and humans working together to prepare the next day's activities. Scholar Murthan was teaching other refugees to identify edible plants. Engineer Quexis was refining his water purification design. Captain Iriloth was planning expanded security patrols with Li Te. They have learned well, Park Hana observed. Much faster than I expected. Intelligence is intelligence, Wu replied. They simply needed someone to show them that wilderness skills are forms of engineering and science, not primitive magic. What happens when their city is repaired? Li Te asked. Wu looked around at the thriving wilderness community they had helped create. That will be their choice to make, but I suspect many of them will want to continue learning these skills. And us? Park Hana asked. Do we return to diplomatic duties once this crisis ends? Wu smiled, watching the stars appear through the forest canopy. I think our diplomatic duties are just beginning. 2 months after the solar storm, the power grid of Verdania Prime hummed back to life. Street lights flickered on, climate control systems resumed their quiet operation, and communication networks began reconnecting the scattered pieces of urban civilization. But something fundamental had changed during those weeks of darkness. Prime Cultivator Threnax stood at the edge of Sector 7, staring into the forest where hundreds of his people had learned to live without technological support. The contrast was striking. Behind him lay the gleaming perfection of the restored city. Ahead stretched wilderness that no longer seemed empty or threatening, but rich with possibilities he was only beginning to understand. The final refugee group returned to the city yesterday, Captain Iriloth reported, approaching through the forest with the quiet confidence he had learned during his wilderness training. However, over 200 citizens have requested permission to remain in the forest camps permanently. And their reasons? Threnax asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They claim improved physical health, reduced stress levels, and greater sense of purpose. Dr. Lethix has documented significant psychological improvements in almost all wilderness participants. Threnax nodded slowly. During the crisis, he had received daily reports about the forest camps through signal mirror communications. What he had learned challenged everything he thought he knew about civilization and progress. Deep in the forest, Wu was conducting his final lessons for the permanent Verdanian residents. The temporary refugee camps had evolved into a small town that blended seamlessly with the natural environment. Solar collectors made from polished metal provided limited electricity for essential systems. Water flowed through carved channels that looked like natural streams but supplied every building. Gardens produced food using techniques that enhanced rather than replaced forest ecosystems. The integration is remarkable, Engineer Quexis said, examining a building that seemed to grow from the living trees that supported it. We have created permanent structures that actually improve environmental conditions rather than degrading them. Your people have natural talent for this work, Wu replied. You simply needed someone to show you that technology and nature could work together instead of in opposition. Scholar Murthan emerged from the forest carrying a basket of medicinal plants he had learned to identify and prepare. The botanical knowledge alone is worth years of research, he told Park Hana. We abandoned so much wisdom when we moved entirely to synthetic alternatives. Traditional knowledge and modern science make each other stronger, Park Hana agreed. Your people are rediscovering that balance. Li Te was working with a group of Verdanian security specialists to establish the first wilderness patrol service in their species' recent history. Environmental monitoring requires different skills than urban security work, he explained, pointing to subtle signs of animal movement along a forest path. But the basic principles are the same. Observe, understand, respond appropriately. Will you remain here to continue training our people? Captain Iriloth asked hopefully. For a while longer, Li Te confirmed. But the goal is to train Verdanian instructors who can teach other Verdanians. Knowledge spreads fastest when it grows from within a culture rather than being imposed from outside. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an official delegation from the city. Prime Cultivator Threnax approached through the forest, moving carefully but without the terror that had characterized earlier Verdanian forays into natural environments. Ambassador Wu, Threnax said formally, the Galactic Council has received reports of your activities on Verdania. They wish to understand what you have accomplished here. We have been camping, Wu replied with a slight smile, though I suspect the Council report describes it differently. The report describes the first successful integration of advanced urban civilization with sustainable wilderness living in recorded galactic history, Threnax said solemnly. Multiple species have requested similar assistance for their own worlds. Parti. Hana looked up from her plant samples with interest. Other species want to learn camping techniques? The Zephyrian Collective has experienced 3 infrastructure failures in the past year due to solar activity. The Mantari Republic faces resource depletion on their heavily industrialized worlds. The Kalani Federation wishes to establish emergency response capabilities that do not depend on vulnerable technological systems. Dr. Lethix approached the group carrying a thick bundle of handwritten notes. "I have documented every aspect of human wilderness education methods," he announced. "The techniques could be adapted for use by any intelligent species." "You want to establish camping schools?" Wu asked, amused by the concept. "We want to establish survival universities," Threnax corrected. "Educational institutions that teach the integration of traditional skills with modern knowledge. Verdania wishes to become the first such institution in the galaxy. With human instructors, of course," Dr. Lethix added hopefully. "Our people have learned much, but we recognize that we are still students in this field." Wu looked around at the forest community that had grown from their simple camp. Verdanians and humans worked side by side, sharing knowledge that made both species stronger. Children from the city visited regularly to learn skills their grandparents had forgotten. Engineers designed buildings that enhanced rather than destroyed natural systems. "I think my grandfather would approve of this," he said finally. "Your grandfather?" Threnax asked. "The man who taught me that camping is not about abandoning civilization. It is about understanding that true civilization works with nature rather than against it." Engineer Quexus approached with excitement, carrying plans for his latest project. "We have designed prototype emergency shelters that can be mass-produced and deployed rapidly during infrastructure failures," he announced. "They use human camping principles, but incorporate Verdanian materials, science." "Show me," Lite requested, studying the engineering drawings with professional interest. The shelter design was ingenious. Lightweight materials could be quickly assembled into structures that provided all the benefits of traditional wilderness shelters while incorporating advanced features like built-in water filtration and passive climate control. "We want to manufacture these for distribution throughout the galaxy," Engineer Quexus explained. "Every world should have emergency capabilities that do not depend on vulnerable infrastructure." Park Hana was documenting the forest community's agricultural innovations when scholar Murthan brought her news that changed everything. "3 more species have sent diplomatic missions to observe our wilderness integration project," he reported. "They all want to establish similar programs on their home worlds." "The galaxy is taking notice," Dr. Lethix confirmed. "What began as a simple research expedition has become a model for sustainable civilization that every advanced species wants to study." That evening, as the forest community gathered for their daily meal, Wu found himself surrounded by representatives from multiple worlds. The Galactic Council had officially recognized the Verdanian Wilderness Integration Project as a major breakthrough in sustainable development and emergency preparedness. "You will be appointed as the first ambassador of wilderness integration," Threnax informed him. "Your mission will be to establish similar programs throughout the galaxy." "And us?" Park Hana asked, gesturing to include Li Te in the question. "Chief Education Officer and Director of Security for the Galactic Wilderness Initiative," Threnax replied. "If you accept the positions." Li Te looked around at the thriving community they had helped create. "My grandfather always said the best defense is a people who can take care of themselves anywhere, under any conditions." "Is that a yes?" Dr. Lethix asked hopefully. "That is a yes," Wu confirmed. "But we do this properly. No rushing, no shortcuts. Wilderness skills require patience and respect to learn correctly." "Understood. How long will you need to establish the first training center?" Wu considered the question seriously. "Give us a year to train the first class of Verdanian instructors, another year to develop curriculum for other species. After that, we can begin accepting students from throughout the galaxy." "And the ultimate goal?" Threnax asked. Park Hana answered for all of them. "To ensure that no intelligent species ever, again, faces the choice between technology and survival." True advancement means being capable in any environment, under any conditions. 3 years later, the Galactic Wilderness Education Center on Verdania graduated its first class of wilderness. Instructors representing 47 different species. The graduates returned to their homeworlds carrying knowledge that had once been considered primitive but was now recognized as advanced, sustainable living. Wu stood in the forest clearing where he had first made camp, now the site of the center's main campus. Buildings designed by engineer Quexus blended perfectly with the natural environment while providing all the educational facilities needed comprehensive wilderness instruction. The Council reports that infrastructure vulnerability across the galaxy has decreased by 60% since our programs began, Park Hana told him, reviewing the latest statistics. Emergency response capabilities have improved on every participating world. Li Te approached through